Hi everyone, my name is Liz. I read and welcome to another video. This is going to be my Mara Dyer review. So the Mara Dyer Trilogy consists obviously of 3 books, and the first book is The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer, which I gave a 4-star rating. The Evolution of Mara Dyer, which I gave a 3-star rating. And then The Retribution of Mara Dyer, which I gave a 4-star rating. And this trilogy is written by Michelle Hodkins. The synopsis for the first book is Mara Dyer, she wakes up in a hospital bed one day without any memories, and her family tells her that she was in an accident. She was in a building with her 2 friends and her boyfriend, and the building collapsed, killing her friends and boyfriend. But she was the only one who survived with basically without a scratch on her. She is struggling with the news of the death of her best friend, specifically Rachel, and she is struggling with PTSD. She starts having hallucinations and she's not sure of what she's seeing, if it's real or if it's not real. In order to cope, they decide as a family to move to a new place. I believe they moved somewhere in Florida, I believe. And she starts a brand new private school, which is a little bit more prestigious than she's used to. She's struggling to make friends. And then there's a boy she meets there named Noah Shaw. As you can probably tell with my star ratings, overall I did enjoy this trilogy, but I have really mixed feelings about it. And I think as a whole, I think I like it less than each individual book, which is also confusing. But let's just get on with starting with The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer. So this book, like I said, begins with that synopsis, and what I really liked about this book was it was more of a contemporary than an actual thriller. I don't read thrillers, and I didn't anticipate actually picking this up, but I found it at the thrift store and I thought I'd give it a go because I know this was very popular a few years ago on BookTube. So I thought I would give it a try, and I found myself really enjoying it. I think this is a really good introduction to thrillers if you want to get into something like that, and if you're more of a YA reader. It's very subtle. I would arguably say that this is more of a contemporary with just some thrilling moments sprinkled in throughout the story, and I think that's what I liked about it. Now, at first I was kind of bored. It was hard to get into, but once she's moved to the new school and she's adjusting, I really like that. There was a lot of those kind of tropes, which I personally enjoy reading. The tropes of a new girl at a new school who is, maybe a little angsty, dealing with her own problems, and who may not really get along with a lot of people at school, but she does develop a friendship in here that I enjoyed, a platonic relationship with a boy, which was kind of enjoyable to read about. And then there's Noah Shaw, who has a reputation at the school for being a ladies' man a little bit, and this story mostly follows the budding relationship between Mara and Noah Shaw and their courtship, I would almost say. And that was my favorite part of this story. Yes, I did really enjoy the thriller parts as well, but ultimately I really enjoyed the contemporary elements of the story. Near the end, when they were starting to reveal more of the paranormal aspects, I did not like the direction it was going and I was nervous, but I remember at the end of the book, it left it a little bit more open-ended, which I really enjoyed. Throughout the book, you weren't sure whether or not what Mara was seeing was real or not real. Because she's having hallucinations, she's struggling with PTSD, and I really enjoyed that. And even near the end of the book, you're still not sure. So it did bring a lot of mystery along the way, and so as you could tell, I did really enjoy this one. The next one is The Evolution of Mara Dyer, and I enjoyed this the least out of the 3. I still mostly enjoyed myself. A lot of this was mostly out of boredom. Almost the first half of the book was boring and almost repetitive when you compare it to the first book. There was a lot of scenes of Mara and Noah together, and I just felt like we already got a lot of that in book 1. And then there's a lot of sitting around and talking and trying to figure out what's going on between Mara and Noah, and I found those segments really boring as well. Also, there's an introduction to a new character with a new perspective and a new storyline that is separate from the original story, and I found those chapters quite boring as well. It wasn't until the main villain showed up and there was more thrilling and scary moments there that I started enjoying the story. If those segments weren't there, I probably would have given this book a 2-star, but since they were there, it kind of redeemed itself and it continued the story forward. Finally, with the Retribution of Mara Dyer, I give this a 4-star rating. As you can see, I really enjoyed it. I loved the opening part of this book. It was so thrilling, so horrific. It almost felt like a horror novel. And I wish that was the direction that this book went in. There were some horrific things that happened in here, and I kind of wanted that for the entire book, but it wasn't that. It switched over to a more like a journey, mystery solving storyline. And the final reveal, the thing that explains absolutely everything, I was frustrated with and let down. Not to a point to have me dislike this book, but it didn't become a 5-star, obviously. And when I take a step back from reading this series, I think in the end, I'm going to give this a 3-star overall, or even a 2.5 or 2-star, because I didn't like the direction it went. Before I move on, I should state some trigger warnings. Obviously, there's trigger warning for PTSD, for hallucinations. There's also trigger warning for depression. There's trigger warnings for self-harm. And like I said, this does get horrific. There's elements of horror in here. So if you get squeamish at all about blood, about medical horror or anything like that, like maybe stay clear. None of that really happens in book 1, but for sure by book 3, those things definitely happen. I'm trying to think what else. I felt like in this series, any trigger warning you can think of happens. There's a trigger warning for assault and sexual assault. There's a lot of trigger warnings in this series, so just be warned before going in. So that is my spoiler-free version of the review. I'm going to move on to spoilery section because I need to try to just get my feelings out. So right now, the spoiler part of the review begins. Okay, spoiler section. One thing I thought it was very interesting about this series was the author really changed genres throughout the progression of this trilogy, which was really interesting, and I kind of commend her for it, and I think she did a really good job of doing that. I wish she did it even further if she was choosing to do so. The first book was mostly contemporary with some thrilling moments. The second book was almost half and half, I would argue, and then by the last book, it was, you start off very thrilling, almost like a horror novel, and I wish the entire book was like that, and it wasn't. It petered off quite a bit during the middle and end of the book. It became more of a superhero novel, the discovery of your powers and things like that, and I enjoyed all that, but it's not what I wanted. Also, I felt cheated in a way after reading book 1. Book 1, it almost promises you that it's going to be a more contemporary trilogy, and you don't get that. It is mostly this weird superhero story, I guess, and that's not what I wanted, and I didn't want that for the characters. I was really surprised by the end of the book. I felt like the characters were cheated, and I did not like the storyline for Mara. I didn't like how she ended up being evil, basically, and she had no control over that, where in book 1, she was a very sympathetic character because she doesn't know what's happening to her, and I liked how Noah was there to help her through the struggles that she was having, and she was very sympathetic character. But by the end of book 3, she was not sympathetic at all. She was making horrific choices, and so I couldn't even sympathize with her at all. And so when she as a character changed so much from book to book, I, for one thing, almost felt it was unbelievable. And it was more unbelievable to think that anyone would be her friend anymore. It was hard to believe that Noah would still love her and things like that. Now, I think in a way that's the whole point of the trilogy, is to be upset by it. And so I think that's why I don't like this trilogy as a whole. Like, during the experience, it was a lot of fun. I do recommend it if it sounds like something you want to read, but characters from book 1, totally different. Like, if you compare book 1 to book 3, not just the characters, but just like the books themselves. Like, book 1 is a contemporary, book 3 is something completely different. And it's very tragic to see characters have to go through some horrific things. So I don't know, but I did really enjoy all the horror elements that were in here. I really enjoyed the medical horror apparently, and I'm definitely thinking about broadening my horizons. But I think that's all I have to say about this trilogy. I don't even know if the spoiler part was even that spoilery. If you have any questions you want to ask me about this trilogy, please do so. Do it down below. I want to know what your thoughts are on this book or this trilogy. If you read it, I want to know. I want to have a conversation because this series was a little weird. So if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you have not done so. You can follow me on Goodreads, Twitter, and Instagram. And you know what, guys? I'm going to keep reading. Bye.